Welcome to Anyone Can Become a Great Communicator. Anyone, anywhere, anytime. What a challenging thought. I remember when I first wanted to be a teacher. And I was asked to speak at school in one of my classes where we were being taught how to speak, how to preach, how to teach. And I would become so nervous for 2 weeks before I got up to speak that I was depressed for 2 weeks out of fear to get up in front of an audience. And after testing it, I said to myself, I don't think I should do this. This is so hard, and I really don't think I was very interesting to the audience. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt, can I really do it? Can I actually become an effective communicator anywhere, anytime, to any group about any subject? What if there were universal laws that governed communication? That when you learned the laws and then practiced them, you could take them with you because they were yours. They were you. And you became the teacher. And that no matter what topic you were asked to speak about, to what audience that you were given, whether it was 2 or 3 people in a small group or 20,000 people, you knew what to do. And you were effective at your communication. Well, that's what this course is all about. This isn't based upon your personality. I know people whose personalities are from this extreme to this extreme that have learned the universal laws that govern effective communication. And when they walk up and they begin to communicate, they are so effective. They could be an introvert or an extrovert. You wouldn't know the difference when they're up front because they learned the role that you assume when you become a communicator. When I was in the back room talking to my wife and talking to some of my friends, I was in one role. When I walked up those steps, I changed roles. I became a communicator. I became the teacher. And once you realize this is a role that you must put on, like this coat. I put this coat on to communicate to you. Well, when you communicate, you have a role. It's almost like when this session is over and we go for break, I will go down those same stairs and I will, before my foot hits the bottom step, I will stop being in this role. I won't be teacher when I walk through that door. I'll be husband again, and I'll talking to Lee or Martin or somebody else back there. We'll have a cup of coffee. I'm a different role. So what I want to talk to you about is this precise role. And when you realize that when I'm in this role, I need to understand how to be in that role effectively. So I want to share that with you, and I want to start off in our introduction about the man who affected me the most as I watched him communicate. I've trained, I would think, a good 200,000 communicators around the world. And I've been able in an hour to take a boring teacher and make them dynamic so that their wife came to me and said, "What on earth did you do to my husband? Please keep doing it." So I want you to know, I'm a coach for you in this. And I do know what I'm doing. And I do know why things work. And if you, in your heart of heart, really want to become a powerful teacher, an effective teacher, a dynamic, life-changing preacher, it's not a mystery. It's not a mystery. But you have to know what you're doing, or it is a mystery. Or you think in your mind, well, that person was born that way. Oh, probably not. Or I could never do that. Oh, that's a lie. Of course you can. If you said you can't do that, and I said to you, I'll give you $25,000 if you come on up here and do what I just did, I promise you. There's not a person in this room who wouldn't get up and all of a sudden be able to do that. True or false? It's true. Okay, good. So, when I was finishing up my first college degree and then my second college degree, I was invited to a conference. And there was a man I'd never heard of who came to speak. And when he spoke, I just was speechless listening to that man communicate. I never moved. I was, wow. And I said to myself, sitting there, wherever that man teaches, I want to go. I want to study under that man. I don't care what he teaches. I want to learn how to do what he did. Well, his name was Dr. Howard Hendricks. He taught me for 4 years. And then we became good friends. Then he became on my board for 25 years. And we traveled the world together, spoke together. But when I was a young man, and I went to this school where he taught, I studied him. He sat behind his desk, and he was precise on the clock. And when the second hand would come on up to the 12, when it was time at 9 o'clock for his course to begin, he would pull his right hand off the thing, and he would make a comment to you that was so profound that everybody in the class would write it down. And if you saw underneath his desk, at about 3 minutes before class began, his left leg would begin bouncing. Women don't typically do this, but men, when they're it's kind of winding you up inside. You could watch his leg. And he had a pattern of teaching. And I studied it. I counted how many minutes he did what and what he did and so forth. And in my last year of being a student, in my 4th year of graduate study, in my last classes with him, there were 30 students, and I decided to give Dr. Howard Hendricks a test myself. He'd given me so many tests, so many papers. I could fill the cabinet with them. I decided I was going to give him the test. I decided I was not going to pay attention in his class. I was going to drive him crazy. And I wanted to see what a master teacher would do if a student would not pay attention. Well, this was a little classroom, 30 students, the final 4th year of study and graduate work. And there was one window. It was right here. And it overlooked a parking lot. And I chose that seat, sat there, and said to myself, I am going to look out that window the entire hour. And I'm not going to take notes. And when he cracks a joke, I am not laughing. I took off my watch. This was a test. Oh, man, this was so much fun. I took off my watch, and I put it on the little desk I had, and I said, I wonder what Hendricks is going to do. So obviously, if you only have 30 people here, you see what everybody's doing, and it's obvious the guy right there is looking out the window, and you think to yourself as a teacher, there must be an accident or something going on. And he noticed that I didn't turn around. Well, he started going, and he noticed that I wasn't listening, and he cracked a joke that was out of context. And I didn't laugh at the joke. And then he never got out of his seat until about minute 6. And he would go back to a whiteboard that was here, and he would pick up his blue pen, not the green one, not the blue one, and he'd pick it up and he'd draw you a chart to help you see something. Well, he started to draw his chart, and he stopped after about 30 seconds drawing his chart. It was incomplete. And the desk was on a little platform, raised off the floor just about this much. He walked over here to the edge of his platform, and he starts talking like this, where I'm right here. He's supposed to be drawing the chart. He climbs off the platform and stands in the corner like this, and he's gesturing like this. I'm starting to sweat. I do not want to look at him. I'm not going to write anything. And in 3 minutes, because I'm timing it, in 3 minutes and 37 seconds, he runs down the aisle and yells at me and says, Wilkinson, what on earth is outside the window? I said, nothing, Prof, sorry. I turned around. I never told him about why I did that till I introduced him to 5,000 people. And I told him that story. And he was sitting right back there. He's shaking his head. He said to me later, I remembered that. It drove me crazy. I said, Prof, do you realize you are so determined to teach your students that if one of them wasn't learning, you could not tolerate it. You changed everything. You changed everything just to come on over here and grab me. I was the lost sheep that you let everybody else alone to grab a hold of that one student. Well, if that happened to you, what would you do? So this was so fresh in my mind that when that class ended, we got up and we went into the next class, which was by a teacher who didn't have the philosophy of Dr. Howard Hendricks. The next teacher had a typical philosophy that it's not my responsibility for you to learn. If you don't want to learn, that's fine with me. I'm here to give you the content, and it's your job to pay attention, and if you don't want to pay attention, so what? And so what happened in this was half of the next class didn't pay attention to this teacher. He was completely boring. And we would do other papers for other classes. Some of my friends read the Time magazine in that class. And the difference of those two was so radical that I've never forgotten it after all these years. Now my question to you is, what would you do if that happened to you? Would you even have cared? The majority of teachers around the world think if they cover their lesson, if they talk about it, then they've done their job. Hendricks said in his mind, I haven't done my job. If I cover the material, my job is to cause you to learn. And if you're not learning, I'm not teaching. I'm not teaching. So when we talk about anyone can become a great communicator, anyone, anywhere, anytime, I want you to understand there are some all-controlling, all-powerful principles that will change everything about you. And of all the things I could start out with, this is the root issue. This is the law of the learner. That is, that I exist to cause the learner to learn. If the learner hasn't learned, I haven't taught. I want you to think about that. Most teachers cover their material, they go over their notes, and they think if I finish my notes, I have taught you today, and they walk out of their room, and many times nobody's learned anything. And so in America, a good percentage of the students in many places of our country are graduating unable to read very well, unable to do any complex math, even though they've gone through the classes. Because the student wasn't really taught by the teacher, they were talked to by the teacher, not taught by the teacher. So as I was thinking about all this and it was rumbling through my mind, I said to myself, I wonder what the Bible says about teaching. And so I tried to find some verses that had teaching and learning in it, and I wanted to see what these words meant. And so on part number 1, we're under the learner mindset, how to think about something. How to think about something. Because it's not just the teacher that thinks this way, is it not also the preacher? Because the preacher thinks in his mind, I have prepared a sermon. And as long as I give the sermon, whether or not you changed or not, it's not my responsibility. Therefore, there is this huge divorce. The divorce is in the classroom, that the teacher has the mindset that says, it's my job to make the outline and talk it to you. It's not my job for you to learn. That's your job. And the preacher has the exact same mindset, not the great preachers, not the ones who cause life change week after week after week. See, it's those preachers who realize, no. The content is supposed to bring about change in my congregation. If change hasn't happened, it's my fault. It's my fault. Like the Old Testament says, when God's really irritated with the prophets, he said, if you had caused my people to learn, they would have changed, and I would not have had to judge them. And God is saying, if you had caused them to learn this, if you had caused them to obey, and God brought the responsibility back to the person who is the teacher or the preacher or the prophet. So as I travel the world and as I hear parents so frustrated, my child is not learning how to read. My child is not learning how to, It's the teacher probably is thinking, it's not my fault. You're not paying attention. And what I want to know, and what I want you to think about is this question. What's God think about this? What's God's definition of a teacher? And so I found two verses that I want you to see in your workbook. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments which I teach you." This is in the Old Testament, and if you know much about the Bible, you know that the Old Testament is really not written in English. It is written in Hebrew. And so I eventually want to study that Hebrew word, which I teach you to observe, to do, that you may live and go in and possess the land which your Lord God of your fathers has given you. So that's the word teach in Deuteronomy 4:1, and the next verse in your workbook is Deuteronomy 5:1. Let's take a look at it. And Moses, this is the next chapter in the same book, and Moses called all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the judgments which I speak in your hearing, that you may, learn them." So I wanted to know a very simple thing. That's teaching. This is learning. I wanted to know what those Hebrew words meant. And so I got out my Hebrew Bible, and I have made a copy of that for you in the next visual. And it is an interlinear that brings together the Hebrew words and the English translation beneath it. And what I did, I'm just going to show you what I did. I came over here, and I looked at Deuteronomy 4:1, and I found I am teaching, and there it is, right there. And I looked at those letters, and I said, okay, and I put that word on a separate piece of paper. And I looked it up in the Hebrew dictionaries and so forth, and then I came down over here, and I looked for the word to learn. There it is right there. And I want to know what it meant. And as I studied those two words, how could you say this? I felt like I was in a completely dark room, and somebody came in and just all the floodlights was so overwhelmingly clear that I said to myself, well, look at that. Because when I look at the word teaching, look at these last three letters. It's L-M-D, lamad in Hebrew. And I came down here, and I looked carefully at this, and I found, no, this can't be true. There's the L, like that L. There's the M, that's M. There's the D, that's D. This is a prefix, this is a suffix. It's the exact same root word. It's the exact same root word. And I wanted to know, what does teaching mean? Well, in Hebrew, when you take a verb and you want to make it to be that the person who does the verb causes it, you put a certain prefix and suffix around it, and you put it into the PL basically, and what happens is this. To teach means this: to take the action of the verb, which is to learn, and to be the causer of the verb. What does teach mean? Teach means I am the person who causes you to do this. I cause you to learn. That if you haven't learned, L-M-A-D, L-M-D, then I haven't taught, L-M-D. Therefore, in God's mind, the teacher and the learner is connected, and you can't separate it. It's the same word. Therefore, the idea that's rampant around the world, and test scores are going down in almost every country of the world. even though we're paying teachers more. It's true. In America, the scores are plummeting, and we're paying the teachers more and more every year. Paying teachers more doesn't mean students learn better. It just means the teacher has a better level of living. And I want to go back, because if we can ever remember what's the truth, that I exist to cause you to learn. That's why I exist. If you haven't learned, biblically speaking, I have not taught you. This is the most powerful truth about being an effective communicator, that I realize unless it happens in you, I've not done anything. I've just talked. Did you get this? Is this a powerful truth or what? It's a powerful truth. That's why Dr. Howard Hendricks told the joke early, finished half a chart, walked over here to the edge of the platform, got off the platform, ran down the aisle, and yelled at a student, 1 out of 30, because that student wasn't learning, and he knows if that student's not learning, I am failing as a teacher. I'm failing as a teacher. Not only does this take place in the classroom, this takes place in the pulpit. Because in the pulpit, when you study the New Testament to see what does God want the pastor to do, Jesus made it very clear. I command you to teach my word so that they obey what I've said. Whoa. Therefore, the teacher exists to cause the person to learn the truth that's supposed to be learned. The pastor exists to teach the truth so that the person changes their behavior and they obey the Bible. And if the person isn't changing and becoming more obedient, then they haven't really preached. They have spoken. So God's position in both of these is don't focus on the person up front. Focus on the people that are the recipients of what you're doing. And if your church, if the people in your church aren't changing, you're failing. You're failing. And if the students aren't learning the content and the skills, you're failing. And once this becomes in your heart, I am the one who's responsible to cause you to learn, it's pretty tough to be boring. Because learning plummets. I mean, it disappears when you have a boring communicator. When your teacher's boring, you don't learn hardly anything.